They thought he was nothing. Just another broken man on the street, invisible, disposable. But the homeless veteran they dragged into that alley wasn't broken. He was the most dangerous weapon America ever created. A ghost with 173 confirmed kills who'd walked away from the war. Tonight, Sergeant Boone and his corrupt squad made a fatal mistake. They woke the sniper. This is the story of Elijah Carter, and vengeance never forgets. Drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far justice travels. The rain fell like judgment on the city streets, cold and relentless, washing the filth into the gutters where it belonged. But some stains, Elijah Carter knew, never washed away. No amount of rain could cleanse what lived inside a man's soul, what burned there in the dark hours when sleep wouldn't come, and the ghosts demanded their due. He sat with his back against the brick wall of Rosie's diner, the neon sign above, casting red and blue shadows across his weathered face. His beard was thick, streaked with gray, and his clothes 3 layers deep against the autumn chill hung loose on a frame that had once been military-grade muscle, but now carried the hollowed look of a man who'd forgotten how to care. A cardboard sign rested against his knee. Veteran. Anything helps. God bless. But God Elijah thought had stopped listening a long time ago. The diner's warmth bled through the window behind him, carrying the smell of coffee and grilled onions. Inside, people laughed. Couples shared desserts. A family with 2 kids colored on placemats. Normal life, the kind Elijah had stopped believing in, somewhere between Kandahar and the nameless village where he'd put a bullet through a warlord's eye from 847 meters away. A record shot. They'd pinned a medal on his chest for that one. He'd thrown it in a river 3 years later. "Spare some change, sir." Elijah's voice was barely a whisper when a businessman hurried past, eyes locked on his phone. The man didn't even glance down. Invisible. That's what Elijah had become, and that's exactly what he'd wanted. When you've spent 12 years as America's most lethal sniper, when you've taken 173 lives in the name of democracy and freedom, and all those other words that sounded so damn hollow when you woke up screaming at 3 in the morning, invisibility becomes the only mercy left. The street was quiet tonight, just the hiss of tires on wet pavement and the distant wail of sirens. Elijah closed his eyes, trying to find that empty space in his mind where the memories couldn't reach. But they always found him. Martinez's face frozen in that last moment before the IED turned him into red mist. The girl in Fallujah who'd stumbled into his line of fire couldn't have been more than 12. The ones who deserved it, and the ones who hadn't, all stacked up like cordwood in the dark corners of his consciousness. Well, 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 what do we have here? Elijah's eyes snapped open. 3 cops stood under the streetlight 20 feet away, their cruiser idling at the curb with its lights off. He recognized the one in the middle immediately. Sergeant Dale Boone, 6'2", 220, with the kind of face that looked like it had been punched too many times, or not enough. Boone had a reputation in this neighborhood, and none of it was good. The other 2 flanked him like attack dogs waiting for a command. Officer Ricky Marsh on the left, young and eager with eyes that gleamed with the kind of cruelty that wore a badge for camouflage. Officer Frank Delgado on the right, older, softer around the middle, but with the dead stare of a man who'd stopped pretending to be one of the good guys. "Looks like a vagrant Sarge," Marsh said, his hand resting on his baton. "Probably been hassling customers." "I haven't bothered anyone," Elijah said quietly, keeping his hands visible, palms up. He knew the dance. He'd played it 100 times in a dozen different cities. Stay calm, stay small. Let them have their moment of power, and maybe they'd move along. But Boone wasn't moving along. He was walking closer, that predator's smile spreading across his face like oil on water. "You know what I hate," Boone said, stopping 5 feet away. "I hate when people like you make this neighborhood look like shit. Bad for business. Bad for property values. Bad for everybody." "I'm just trying to get something to eat, officer." Elijah kept his voice level, his eyes down. Every instinct honed over 12 years of combat was screaming at him. Threat assessment, escape routes, weapon count. Boone had a Glock 22 on his right hip, taser on his left. Marsh carried the same plus that baton he was so eager to use. Delgado had his hand near his peace fingers, twitching. 3 against 1, but they were sloppy, overconfident, clustered too tight. Elijah shut down the tactical analysis. That life was over. He was nobody now. Just a ghost trying to fade into the rain. "Something to eat!" Boone laughed, and it was a sound like gravel in a garbage disposal. "With what money?" "Let me guess you've been panhandling, breaking City Ordinance 14B. That's a finable offense, friend." "I wasn't panhandling," Elijah lied. "Just sitting." "Just sitting?" Boone repeated, his voice dripping with mockery. He turned to his officers. "You hear that, boys? He was just sitting, with a sign that says anything helps, but he wasn't panhandling." Marsh laughed on cue. Delgado just watched expressionless. Elijah felt the situation deteriorating, that familiar electric charge in the air before violence breaks loose. He'd felt it in Baghdad and Kabul, in 1,000 hostile situations where death walked in with a smile. He started to stand slowly, hands still visible. "Stay down." Boone snapped his hand, moving to his taser. "I'll move along," Elijah said. "No trouble." "See? That's where you're wrong." Boone stepped closer, close enough that Elijah could smell the coffee and cigarettes on his breath. "You've already made trouble just by being here. By existing. By making this city look like we don't take care of our homeless problem." Problem. Elijah felt something stir inside him. Something he'd been trying to keep buried. "I'm a person, not a problem." Boone's smile vanished. "What did you just say to me?" I said. The baton came out of nowhere, swung by Marsh, catching Elijah across the ribs. The pain was immediate and electric, but Elijah had felt worse. He'd been stabbed, shot, beaten by Taliban interrogators before Bishop extracted him from that hellhole in Helmand. This was nothing. He gasped, but didn't go down. "Resisting arrest," Marsh announced with theatrical enthusiasm. "I'm not—" Elijah started, but Delgado was on him, then grabbing his arm, twisting it behind his back. Elijah let his body go loose, didn't resist. Fighting back would only make it worse. These weren't enemy combatants, they were cops, and cops had the power here, had the law on their side, twisted as it was. They slammed him face first against the wet pavement. The impact jarred his teeth, sent stars dancing across his vision. Water soaked through his clothes, cold and viscous. "Please," Elijah said, hating the word, even as it left his mouth. "I haven't done anything." "Shut up." Boone growled, his knee pressing into Elijah's back. Strong hands patted him down roughly, invasively. They found nothing, no wallet, no ID, no weapons. Just a broken man with empty pockets, and a past that would stay buried as long as nobody asked the right questions. "No identification," Delgado announced. "We should bring him in." "For what?" Boone said. "Booking him means paperwork, and paperwork means I miss the end of the game." He pressed harder, grinding Elijah's face into the concrete. "How about we just teach him a lesson about where trash belongs?" Through the pain and the pressure, Elijah's mind detached, floating above the scene like he was watching it happen to someone else. He'd mastered this skill in the desert during the long hours in the sniper's hide, when his body became just another tool, just another piece of equipment to be used and discarded. Pain was temporary. Humiliation was temporary. He'd survived worse. But something about Marsh's laugh, high and eager like a hyena over a kill, touched something deep in Elijah's chest, some last ember of the warrior he used to be. "Get up," Boone ordered, pulling him roughly to his feet. "Walk." They marched him into the alley beside the diner, away from the street, away from witnesses. The narrow space stank of garbage and piss, and the rain barely penetrated here, leaving the darkness thick and oily. This was wrong, all wrong. Elijah's combat instincts were screaming now, but he kept them leashed. These were cops. Dirty cops maybe, but still cops. And he was nobody. Nobody. Marsh shoved him against the wall, and this time when the baton came, it was to his kidney. Elijah grunted, his legs nearly buckling. Another hit, this one to his shoulder, then his thigh. They were working him over systematically, careful to avoid his face anywhere that would show. "This is for making our city look bad," Marsh panted, punctuating each word with a blow. Through the haze of pain, Elijah heard Boone's radio crackle. "All units, we have a 10-34 at 5th and Madison. Need backup." Boone cursed. "That's in our zone." He looked at Elijah, crumpled against the wall. "We're done here. And you're going to disappear, right? Find another city, another corner. Because if I see you here again, it's going to be a lot worse." "Yes, sir," Elijah whispered, tasting blood. They left him there, their laughter echoing off the alley walls as they climbed back into their cruiser and drove away, lights spinning to life as they raced toward the call. The sound of the siren faded, and Elijah was alone again in the dark ribs, screaming body trembling. He stayed down for a long time, letting the rain that dripped from the fire escape above wash the blood from his lip. His mind worked through the scenario, analyzing every choice he'd made, every moment he'd stayed passive. He could have stopped them. 3 cops drunk on their own power, sloppy and overconfident. He could have taken Marsh's baton, broken his arm, used him as a shield while he disarmed Delgado. Boone would have gone for his gun, but Elijah could read a draw before it happened, had made a career of anticipating that split second between thought and action. He could have put Boone down in 3 moves, maybe 4. But then what? He'd be a cop killer. Hunted. And worse, he'd be Elijah Carter again, the weapon, the killer, the ghost, with 173 names written in blood on his soul. No. This was better. This pain was better. Because pain meant he was still human, still capable of suffering, still connected to the world in some way that didn't involve a scope and a trigger. Elijah pushed himself up slowly, every movement an agony. His cardboard sign had dissolved in the rain, the ink running like tears. He left it there and limped out of the alley, keeping to the shadows, heading nowhere in particular because nowhere was all he had left. 3 blocks away, he found an abandoned building, a relic of better economic times, now surrendered to the city's decay. The door had been kicked in months ago, and inside a small community of forgotten people had made their home. Elijah knew some of them: Rita, who talked to angels; Marcus, whose mind had been shattered by the war before Elijah's; Tommy, 16 years old and already swallowed by the street's hungry mouth. "Jesus, Eli," Marcus said when he saw him. "What happened?" "Fell down," Elijah muttered, making his way to his spot in the corner. He had a sleeping bag there, threadbare but dry, and a backpack with his worldly possessions, a change of clothes, a book he couldn't focus enough to read, and a St. Christopher medal his mother had given him before she died. He also had something else hidden in a false bottom of the backpack. Something he told himself he'd never use again, a burner phone with 1 number programmed into it. Emergency contact, just in case. Elijah had never called it. Never would. That number was a door back into the world he'd escaped, and going back meant remembering everything, becoming everything, losing everything, all over again. "They did this to you," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "The cops." Elijah didn't answer. He lowered himself onto the sleeping bag, every breath a knife in his side. Probably a cracked rib, maybe 2. He'd had worse. He'd had so much worse. "There's a clinic," Marcus offered. "Free place on 9th Street. They'll patch you up, no questions." "Tomorrow," Elijah said, though he knew he wouldn't go. Clinics meant forms, forms meant names, and names meant being real again. He'd rather hurt. That night, Elijah didn't sleep. The pain was too sharp, and the memories were too close. He lay in the dark, listening to the breathing of his fellow ghosts, and thought about a time when he'd been somebody. When he'd worn the uniform with pride. When protecting and serving had meant something other than a license to brutalize. He'd been 22 when he joined the army, angry and lost after his father's death, looking for purpose, for family, for something that felt real. The recruiter had seen him coming a mile away, smart enough, angry enough, hungry enough. Perfect soldier material. Elijah had excelled. Top of his class, in basic, then ranger school, then selection for special forces. He had a gift, the instructors said. Patience, precision, and something they called the eye. That rare ability to read distance, wind, humidity, 1,000 variables, and make the shot. Always make the shot. By 26, he was in Afghanistan, part of a ghost team that didn't officially exist, taking out high-value targets from distances that made the brass shake their heads in disbelief. 200 meters. 1,500. 1,847. The shot that broke records and broke something inside Elijah, because that target had a family, had children, had people who loved him, even if he was a monster, and Elijah had erased him from existence with one squeeze of the trigger. After that, the kills had blurred together. Good guys, bad guys, the lines getting harder to see. Elijah had become a machine, efficient and cold, the most lethal weapon in America's arsenal. They'd given him medals he didn't want, and missions he couldn't refuse, and somewhere in the blood and sand and screaming, he'd lost himself. The breakdown had come in Beirut, a mission gone wrong. Civilians caught in the crossfire, and Elijah standing over the bodies, his hands shaking, his mind finally fracturing under the weight of all those ghosts. Bishop had pulled him out, gotten him stateside, arranged for the discharge that wasn't quite honorable, but wasn't quite anything else either. You've given enough. Bishop had set his hand on Elijah's shoulder. More than enough. Now rest. But rest never came. The ghosts followed. The nightmares grew teeth. And one day, Elijah had simply walked away from everything, his apartment, his bank account, his name, and disappeared into the America he'd been fighting to protect. The real America, the one nobody wanted to see. Now, lying in an abandoned building with broken ribs and a bleeding lip, Elijah wondered if this was his penance. If this suffering was the price for all those lives he'd taken. If becoming nothing was the only way to atone for being too deadly, too good at what he did. The rain had stopped by the time morning came. Gray light filtered through the broken windows, and Elijah forced himself up, biting back a groan. Marcus was already gone, probably to the soup kitchen on 12th. Rita was asleep, murmuring prayers to her angels. Tommy sat near the door, keeping watch, his young face already old, with the kind of knowledge no teenager should have. "You good?" Tommy asked. "I'm breathing," Elijah replied, which was as close to good as he'd been in years. He made his way outside into a city that was waking up to another day of indifference. The streets were cleaner after the rain, but only superficially. The rot was still there under the surface in places like that alley, in people like Boone. Elijah found himself walking back toward the diner. He should have taken Boone's advice and disappeared, but something pulled him there. Maybe stubbornness. Maybe the last trace of pride. This was his corner, his small piece of the world, and he wasn't ready to surrender it yet. Rosie's diner looked different in the daylight, less neon romantic, and more worn. Through the window, Elijah could see the morning crowd, construction workers, gulping coffee, nurses, ending their night shifts, the machinery of normal life turning its gears. He settled into his spot against the wall, closed his eyes, and tried to find that empty space again. But the pain in his ribs kept him anchored to reality, kept him present in a way that felt almost cruel. "You look like hell, soldier." Elijah's eyes snapped open. An old man stood before him, 70s maybe, with an Army Ranger's jacket, and eyes that had seen their own share of ghosts. "I'm fine," Elijah said automatically. "Bullshit!" The old man lowered himself to sit beside Elijah, grunting with the effort. "Name's Pete Harrison, medic 1st Cav Vietnam." "Elijah," he replied, then caught himself. He never gave his real name. But there was something about Pete, something in the way he moved, the way he looked at the world, that bypassed Elijah's defenses. "Someone worked you over good." Pete observed his trained eye cataloging injuries. Cops. Elijah didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. Yeah. Pete nodded, unsurprised. City's getting worse. Used to be they'd just move you along. Now? He trailed off, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. Here, get yourself checked out. And maybe some food that ain't garbage. I can't. Take it, Pete insisted. One soldier to another. We look after our own, even when our country doesn't. Elijah took the money, his throat tight. Thank you. Don't thank me, just stay alive. Pete pushed himself up with effort. And Elijah, whatever you're running from, whatever weight you're carrying, you don't have to carry it alone. There's a VA office on 6th Street. Good people there. They can help. I'm fine, Elijah said again, but Pete just shook his head. No soldier who ends up on the street is fine, son. But that's your call. Just know the options there. Pete shuffled away, and Elijah clutched the $20 bill like a lifeline. It was more than money. It was recognition, acknowledgement that he was still human, still worthy of care. And that recognition hurt worse than the beating because it reminded him of everything he'd lost, everything he'd thrown away. The day passed slowly. A few people dropped change in his empty coffee cup. Others walked by without seeing him, and that was fine. Elijah was good at being invisible. But invisibility ended at 8:47 p.m. when Sergeant Boone's cruiser rolled up to the curb, and the man himself climbed out alone, this time, his face twisted with something that looked like satisfaction mixed with concern. You're still here, Boone said, standing over Elijah. I told you to disappear. It's a free country, Elijah said quietly. Not for people like you. Boone crouched down, his voice dropping low. See, I got curious about you. Ran your face through the database, just routine stuff. And you know what came up. Elijah's blood went cold. Nothing. Boone continued. Not a damn thing. No name, no record, no nothing. Like you don't even exist. Now that's interesting, don't you think? Because facial recognition software doesn't usually whiff on someone unless... His eyes narrowed. Unless they've been erased. And only certain kinds of people get erased. I don't know what you're talking about, Elijah said, but he could feel the walls closing in. Yeah, you do. Boone stood up. I made some calls, asked some questions to people who ask questions for a living, and funny thing, my queries got flagged. Within an hour, I got a very interesting phone call telling me to forget what I saw, forget your face, and definitely forget I ever ran that scan. Elijah said nothing. His mind was racing, calculating. The flag would have gone to DOD, probably filtered through whatever Black Ops division still tracked former Ghost Team operators. They'd have protocols for this. Containment, suppression, and if Boone kept digging... So here's what's going to happen, Boone said, his voice hardening. You're going to tell me who you really are and why the hell the Department of Defense is interested in a homeless bum on my beat. And if you don't... The phone in Boone's pocket rang. He pulled it out, frowned at the number, then answered. Sergeant Boone. Elijah watched as the blood drained from Boone's face. Whatever was being said on the other end of that call, it wasn't good news. Yes, sir, Boone said stiffly. I understand. Yes, right away. Sir. He hung up, stared at the phone for a long moment, then looked at Elijah with something new in his eyes. Fear. What the hell are you? Boone whispered. Elijah didn't answer. He just stared back, and for the first time in 3 years, he let the mask slip. Let Boone see beneath the homeless veteran to the weapon underneath the ghost who'd killed men from miles away, who'd erased targets in a dozen countries, who'd been America's most lethal asset. Boone took a step back. I'm nobody, Elijah said softly. And you're going to forget you ever saw me. That was a 2-star general, Boone said, his voice shaking slightly. He told me to release you immediately and destroy any records of our encounter. He said if I didn't, I'd be transferred to a prison detail in Alaska. What the fuck, man, who are you? I told you. Nobody. Boone stared at him for another long moment, then turned and walked back to his cruiser. Before he got in, he looked back one last time. This isn't over. But it was. Elijah knew it as soon as Boone's taillights disappeared around the corner. The phone call meant his cover was blown, meant people knew where he was, meant the past had finally caught up. He had maybe a few hours before they came for him, and they wouldn't be gentle about it. He gathered his few possessions, stuffed them in his backpack, and started walking. He had to get away from this street, this neighborhood, this city. Had to disappear again, deeper this time, somewhere they couldn't find him. But as Elijah turned down a dark side street, he saw the SUV waiting. Black-tinted windows, engine running. Not police, not military. Something worse. The back door opened, and a voice called out, smooth and confident, "Elijah Carter, get in. We need to talk." And Elijah knew with the certainty that came from 12 years of surviving the unsurvivable that his war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Elijah's hand instinctively moved to his side, where a sidearm would have been years ago in another life. But there was nothing there except bruised ribs and the ghost of muscle memory. The SUV's interior light cast long shadows across the wet pavement, and the man inside remained hidden in darkness, just a silhouette and that smooth, confident voice. "I'm not asking twice, Carter," the voice said. "And before your mind goes where I know it's going, we're not here to hurt you. If we were, you'd already be dead." Fair point. Elijah had spotted at least 2 other positions, a sedan across the street, probably containing Overwatch, and a panel van at the corner with its engine running. Professional setup. These people knew what they were doing, which meant they knew who he was, which meant running would be pointless. He walked toward the SUV, each step a calculated risk, his eyes cataloging exits and angles out of pure habit. When he reached the door, he peered inside. The man sitting there was mid-50s, silver hair, cut military short, wearing an expensive suit that somehow looked comfortable on him. His face was weathered but sharp, and his eyes, those eyes had seen combat. "Major Richard Hayes," the man said, extending his hand. "Though I haven't used that rank in 8 years. These days I'm just a consultant for people who need problems solved quietly." Elijah didn't take the hand. "I'm not a problem anymore." "No." Hayes smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Then why did a street cop's database query trigger every alarm bell from here to Langley? Why did a 2-star general have to make a phone call he didn't want to make? Why am I sitting here in the rain instead of home with my wife?" "Not my concern." "Get in the car, Elijah." Hayes's voice hardened just slightly. "Or I leave, and whoever comes next won't be nearly as friendly. The Pentagon knows you're here now. That means other people will know soon. People with long memories and longer grudges." Elijah felt the weight of those words. Hayes was right. Once the system flagged him, the information would leak. It always did. And there were plenty of people in dark corners of the world who'd pay good money to know where Elijah Carter had ended up. He climbed into the SUV. The door closed behind him with the solid thunk of armored plating. Hayes signaled the driver, and they pulled away from the curb, smooth and professional. "Where are we going?" Elijah asked. "Nowhere specific. Just driving while we talk." Hayes pulled out a tablet, tapped a few commands, and turned it toward Elijah. "This is the file that came up when Sergeant Boone ran your face. Or rather, this is what should have come up." The screen showed Elijah's military photo from 12 years ago. Younger, harder, with eyes that hadn't yet learned to avoid their own reflection. Below it, page after page of classified operations, kill confirmations, commendations. His whole career reduced to data points and body counts. "Level 5 DoD operative," Hayes read. "Ghost Team, Tier 1 asset. Confirmed eliminations, 173. Longest confirmed kill, 1,847 meters. Status, honorably discharged, 2022. He looked up. "Except we both know that last part's bullshit. You didn't retire. You vanished." "I left the game," Elijah said quietly. "That's all that matters." Left the game. Hayes laughed, but there was no humor in it. Elijah, you were never in a game. You were a weapon. The weapon. You think people just forget about weapons like you. The agency spent 3 years and $11 million turning you into what you became. They don't write that off. I don't care what they write off. But they care about you. Hayes swiped to another screen. This is the flag that went up when Boone ran your scan. Automatic notification to DoD Intelligence, CIA, NSA, and 3 other agencies whose initials you've never heard of. Within 20 minutes, we had your location, your status, and a full workup on everyone you've had contact with in the past 72 hours. Elijah's stomach clenched. The people at the shelter are fine. We're not monsters. Hayes put the tablet away. But you need to understand what you've done. By letting yourself get spotted, by letting that cop run your face, you've opened a door that's been sealed for 3 years. And now things are going to come through that door. What things? Hayes was quiet for a moment, watching the city slide past the tinted windows. When he spoke again, his voice was different, not the smooth consultant anymore, but the soldier underneath. You remember Beirut, your last mission? Elijah remembered. The mission that broke him. What about it? The target was Victor Langston's brother Marcus. You put a bullet through his skull from across the city. Clean shot. Mission accomplished. Hayes turned to look at Elijah directly. Except Victor didn't see it that way. He saw it as murder. And he spent the last 3 years looking for the man who killed his brother. The name hit Elijah like a punch. Victor Langston, arms dealer smuggler connected to half the criminal organizations between here and Moscow. Elijah had dismantled his operation in 6 different countries, cutting off supply lines, eliminating key personnel, and finally in that Beirut apartment at 3:47 a.m., killing Marcus Langston while he slept beside his mistress. Victor doesn't know it was me, Elijah said, but even as he spoke, he knew how hollow it sounded. He does now. Hayes pulled out his phone, showed Elijah a surveillance photo taken less than an hour ago. It showed Sergeant Boone in what looked like a warehouse talking to a man in an expensive coat. That's Victor Langston. And that's your friend Boone, who just told him everything, your face, your location, the fact that the DoD is protecting you. Victor now knows that the homeless man he had beaten is the ghost who destroyed his empire. Shit, Elijah breathed. Yeah, shit. Hayes pocketed the phone. Victor's already put out a contract. $500,000 for your head. And before you ask, no, the government isn't going to protect you. You're a ghost. Remember? Officially, you don't exist. Which means officially, nothing that happens to you is their problem. Then why are you here? Because I knew you back in the day, watched you work, admired your skill. Hayes leaned forward. And because I'm offering you a way out. Come back in. Reactivate. Work for us again, and we'll make Victor Langston disappear. We'll clean up this mess and get you somewhere safe. Somewhere you can actually have a life. Elijah looked at the man, really looked at him, and saw the lie beneath the words. Hayes didn't want to save him. Hayes wanted to use him. The agency always wanted to use him. That's all he'd ever been to them, a tool, a weapon, something to be pointed at problems and pulled like a trigger. No, Elijah said. No. Hayes raised an eyebrow. You understand what you're turning down. Protection Resources Support. I understand I'm saying no. Elijah's voice was firm. I'm done killing for people who think murder is policy. Hayes studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I thought you'd say that. Hoped you wouldn't, but thought you would. He knocked on the partition and the SUV pulled over. Then we're done here. You're on your own, Carter. Good luck staying alive. Elijah climbed out onto a street he didn't recognize somewhere in the warehouse district where the city's industrial bones showed through the skin. The SUV drove away, its taillights disappearing into the rain that had started falling again. He was alone. Truly alone. No agency backup, no military support, just a broken soldier with broken ribs standing in the rain while professional killers hunted him for money. Elijah started walking his mind, already working through the problem tactically. He needed weapon supplies and information. The backpack on his shoulders contained nothing useful for survival against trained assassins. He needed to get back to basics, back to the skills that had kept him alive through 12 years of war. The abandoned factory loomed ahead, its windows dark and empty like dead eyes. Elijah's instincts screamed warning, but he had no choice. He needed to get off the street, needed time to think to plan. He approached carefully, watching for signs of ambush, but the building seemed genuinely empty. He slipped through a broken loading dock door into darkness that smelled of rust and decay. His eyes adjusted slowly, picking out the shapes of old machinery, scattered debris, the detritus of failed industry. A good place to hide. A good place to... The muzzle flash came from above a brief star in the darkness. Elijah was already moving, muscle memory overriding thought, his body hitting the concrete floor as the bullet cracked past where his head had been. Suppressed weapon subsonic rounds. Professional hit team. Another flash. Another bullet singing through the air. Elijah rolled behind a support pillar, his heart hammering, but his mind ice-cold and clear. 2 shooters, maybe 3. Positioned in the catwalks above crossfire pattern. They'd been waiting for him. Someone had known he'd come here. Someone had predicted his moves. Elijah Carter. A voice echoed through the factory Russian accent thick as Moscow winter. $500,000. Not bad for a man who lives in trash. Yes. Elijah didn't answer. He was mapping the space in his mind, counting exits, measuring distances. The shooters had the high ground and night vision. He could see the faint green glow from their scopes. But they'd made a mistake. They'd announced themselves, and in doing so, they'd given away their positions. Nothing to say. The legend is shy. Another burst of laughter from the catwalks. We expected someone more impressive. They say you killed 173 men. You look like you couldn't kill a rat. Let them talk. Elijah was moving now, silent as smoke, using the machinery for cover. His fingers found what he needed, a piece of rebar 2 feet long, heavy enough. Not a gun, but he'd killed men with less. The third shooter gave himself away with a cough. 40 feet up northwest catwalk, probably AR-15 variant based on the shot spacing. The other 2 were covering the exits east and south. Standard formation. Textbook, really. Elijah found a chunk of concrete, hefted it, and threw it across the factory floor. It clattered loudly in the darkness, and immediately 3 muzzle flashes lit up the space as the shooters fired at the sound. In that brief moment of light, Elijah saw everything, their positions, their weapons, their faces. And he moved. The metal stairs rang softly under his feet as he climbed, using the sound of their gunfire for cover. The northwest shooter was still focused on the floor, scanning for movement, when Elijah came up behind him. The rebar caught him across the throat. Not a kill strike, not yet. Elijah needed information. The man went down choking, and Elijah had his rifle before he hit the floor. AR-15, just as he'd guessed, suppressor still warm. He checked the magazine, 23 rounds, and moved to the railing. Yuri! One of the other shooters called out. You get him. Elijah lined up the shot. The eastern shooter was leaning over the railing, trying to see his partner. Amateur mistake. The rifle kicked softly against Elijah's shoulder, and the man dropped without a sound. The third shooter was smart. He went dark immediately. No more calls. No more movement. Elijah waited, breathing slow and controlled, letting his senses expand into the darkness. This was the sniper's game, the patient hunter's art. And Elijah had been the best. 5 minutes passed. 10. The factory was silent except for the drip of rain through the rusted roof. Elijah didn't move, didn't breathe harder than necessary. He could wait all night if needed. He'd once waited 72 hours in a hide site in Fallujah, motionless for a target that never came. This was nothing. The sound when it came was tiny, just the scrape of a boot on metal grating. South catwalk moving toward the exit. The shooter was cutting his losses running. Elijah tracked the sound, led the movement, and squeezed the trigger. The muzzle flash lit up the dark just long enough to see the body fall. Elijah waited another 10 minutes, making sure there were no more surprises, then moved to check the bodies. All three were Russian. All three carried professional gear. Good weapons, armor, communications equipment. They'd been sent by someone who knew what they were doing. The one he'd hit with the rebar was still breathing barely. Elijah knelt beside him, the rifle trained on his chest. "Who sent you?" The man coughed blood, his eyes defiant. "You're dead anyway. More will come." "Who sent you?" Elijah pressed the barrel against the man's knee. "Last chance." "Langston. Victor Langston. He says hello from his brother." The man laughed, red bubbling between his teeth. "He says you can't hide. He owns this city, owns the cops, the judges, the whole rotten system. You're already a ghost. He's just making it official." "Where is he?" "Go to hell." The man's eyes rolled back, and the breathing stopped. Elijah stood slowly processing the information. Victor Langston had enough reach to know Elijah's patterns to predict where he'd run to position killers in the exact right place at the exact right time. That meant surveillance informants, maybe even direct access to the DoD systems that had flagged him. He needed to move, needed to think. The rifle had maybe 20 rounds left, and he took ammunition and magazines from the other bodies, plus one of their tactical vests. Not perfect, but better than nothing. He found a phone on the second body, encrypted but still active. A mistake on their part, bringing live phones to a hit. But professionals got sloppy when they thought the target was helpless. Elijah scrolled through the recent calls, all to the same number. He hit dial. It rang twice before a voice answered, smooth and controlled with just a hint of an accent. "Is it done?" "Your men are dead," Elijah said quietly. "And I'm coming for you next." Silence on the other end, stretching long enough that Elijah wondered if he'd miscalculated. Then, "Carter, the ghost speaks." Victor Langston's voice was different now, colder, harder. "You killed my brother." "I did my job." "Your job." "Yes, of course. Just following orders, just pulling triggers, just destroying lives because someone in Washington pointed you in a direction." Victor's voice rose slightly, the only crack in his composure. "Marcus wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a threat. He was asleep in his own bed when you murdered him. He was trafficking weapons to terrorists. He had American blood on his hands. And you're so pure, so righteous." Victor laughed, and it was a sound like breaking glass. "You've killed 173 people, Carter. 173 human beings erased from existence because you're good at math and wind calculation. Don't lecture me about blood." Elijah had no answer to that. He'd stopped trying to justify his actions years ago, stopped trying to convince himself he was one of the good guys. The truth was messier, darker, more complicated than heroes and villains. "I didn't call to argue," Elijah said. "I called to tell you this ends now. Pull your people back, forget about me, and we both walk away." "Walk away." Victor's voice dropped to something dangerous. "You think I spent 3 years looking for you just to walk away? You think I built what I built just to let you live? No, Carter. You're going to die. And before you do, you're going to watch everything you care about die first." "I don't care about anything," Elijah said truthfully. "You can't threaten me with loss." "Everyone cares about something, even ghosts." Victor paused. "That shelter where you sleep, Rita, Marcus, little Tommy. They're your people now, aren't they? Your new unit. What do you think happens to them if you don't surrender?" Ice flooded Elijah's veins. "You touch them and what, you'll kill me. You were going to do that anyway." Victor's voice was triumphant now. "Here's what's going to happen. You have 24 hours to turn yourself over to me. Come alone, come unarmed, come ready to pay for what you did. Or I'll burn that shelter to the ground with everyone inside. Your choice, hero." The line went dead. Elijah stood in the dark factory surrounded by bodies. He'd made the phone still pressed to his ear, and felt something he hadn't felt in years: fear. Not for himself, he'd stopped being afraid of death somewhere in the Hindu Kush, but for others. For Rita with her angels, for Marcus with his broken mind, for Tommy, who was just a kid trying to survive. They'd become his unit without him realizing it, his people. And now they were in danger, because of what he was, what he'd been, what he could never stop being. The hunter, reborn. Elijah dropped the phone, crushed it under his heel, and started moving. He had 24 hours to do the impossible: take down a criminal empire entrenched in the city's power structure, protected by corrupt cops, and bought judges defended by professional killers with unlimited resources. 24 hours to remember who he'd been before he became nobody. He left the factory the way he'd come, slipping into the rain-slicked streets with the rifle hidden under his coat. The city looked different now, not a place to hide, but a battlefield. Every shadow held potential threats, every corner a possible ambush. Victor Langston owned this territory, had eyes everywhere, and Elijah was walking through hostile ground with minimal weapons and no backup. But he'd done this before. Mosul, Kandahar, Beirut cities, where every civilian could be an enemy, where death came from windows and doorways and the hands of children. He knew how to move in chaos, how to be the predator instead of prey. First, he needed information. Victor Langston's operation had to have a center, a command post where he coordinated his empire. Finding it would require resources Elijah didn't have, or it would require making someone tell him. The police station on 5th Street was quiet at 11 p.m., just a few patrol cars in the lot and light bleeding from the windows. Elijah watched from across the street, counting officers, timing their movements. Boone would be here. He was always here, treating the station like his personal kingdom. And Boone had talked to Victor Langston, which meant Boone knew things. Elijah waited until the shift change at midnight, when the chaos of officers coming and going would provide cover. He moved with them, just another body in the crowd, head down, unremarkable. The rifle was hidden in a maintenance closet he'd scouted earlier, couldn't bring that inside. The locker room was empty when he entered, steam still hanging in the air from recent showers. Elijah found Boone's locker, the man's name stenciled in fading marker, and picked the lock with practiced ease. Inside, the usual cop detritus, but also a burner phone. Interesting. He pocketed the phone and moved to the restroom, locking himself in a stall. The phone's recent calls told a story. 3 calls to the same number, all after the database scan, all lasting less than a minute. The last one was just 2 hours ago. The door to the locker room opened. Heavy footsteps whistling something tuneless. Elijah peered through the crack in the stall door and saw Sergeant Boone, still in uniform, heading for his locker. "Shit," Boone muttered when he found it open. Shit. Elijah stepped out of the stall, the phone in his hand. "Looking for this?" Boone spun around, his hand going for his service weapon, but Elijah was faster. He closed the distance in 3 steps, caught Boone's wrist, twisted hard. The gun clattered to the tile floor, and Elijah swept Boone's legs, putting him down hard. "We need to talk," Elijah said quietly, his knee on Boone's chest. "About Victor Langston." "I don't know what you're talking about," Boone gasped, but his eyes told the truth. "You sold me out. Told him who I was, where I was. Now he's threatening innocent people." Elijah pressed harder. "So you're going to tell me everything, where Langston operates from, who protects him, how deep the corruption goes. And you're going to do it quickly, because my patience is very, very thin right now." "He'll kill me," Boone wheezed. "I'll kill you if you don't talk." Elijah's voice was flat, emotionless. "And I'm right here." Boone's resistance crumbled. The tough cop, the bully who beat homeless men for sport, was just a coward when faced with someone who truly understood violence. "Warehouse district near the old port. He runs everything from there: drugs, guns, trafficking. Half the department's on his payroll. The other half is too scared to act. Who's his protection? Everyone. City council judges, even the damn mayor's office. Langston's been building this network for 10 years. He's untouchable. Nobody's untouchable. Elijah stood, letting Boone breathe. You're going to help me get to him. Are you insane? I do that, I'm dead. You're dead anyway, Elijah said matter-of-factly. You just don't know it yet. Langston doesn't leave loose ends, and you're a very loose end right now. Your only chance is to help me take him down before he decides you're a liability. The truth of those words sank into Boone's face, draining what little color remained. What do you want me to do? Get me inside that warehouse, tonight. Tonight? That's impossible. The security? Get me inside, Elijah repeated. Or I'll leave you here for Langston's people to find with this phone in your pocket. I'm sure he'll believe you were planning to betray him. Boone stared at him, weighing his options, and found them all terrible. Finally, he nodded. There's a loading dock on the south side. I can get you in there, but after that, you're on your own. That's all I need? They left the station separately, Boone in his patrol car, and Elijah on foot, moving through streets that had become a war zone in his mind. Every car was a potential threat, every person a possible enemy. But this was familiar territory for him, not the city specifically, but the feeling of being alone behind enemy lines, with nothing but skill and will to keep him alive. He retrieved the rifle from the maintenance closet, checked its load one more time, and headed toward the warehouse district where Victor Langston waited. The rain was falling harder now, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled like artillery fire. Elijah moved through it all like a ghost returning from the dead, and the city held its breath for the violence that was coming. The warehouse loomed against the night sky like a monument to corruption, its rusted metal walls streaked with rain and decades of neglect. From his position behind a shipping container 200 yards out, Elijah counted 12 guards visible on the perimeter, more than he'd expected, less than he'd feared. They moved in patterns professional, but not military, the kind of security you got when you paid well, but didn't demand excellence. Boone's patrol car rolled up to the south entrance at exactly 1:17 a.m., headlights cutting through the rain. Elijah watched through the rifle scope as Boone stepped out, spoke briefly with the guards, gestured toward the loading dock. The guards laughed at something Boone said, relaxed, waved him through. Good. The corrupt cop still had access, still had trust, for now. Elijah moved when the guards turned away, crossing the open ground in a low run, using the darkness and rain for cover. His boots hit puddles without sound, an old trick letting the water muffle impact. He reached the loading dock as Boone was pulling the door open from inside, and slipped through before it closed. Jesus! Boone breathed, his face pale in the dim light. I can't believe I'm doing this. You're doing this because you want to live, Elijah reminded him, checking his rifle. 23 rounds, one spare magazine. Not nearly enough if this went wrong. What's the layout? Main floor is storage, legitimate cargo mixed with the illegal stuff. Langston's office is on the second level northeast corner. He's got maybe 20 men inside at any given time, more if he's expecting trouble. He's expecting trouble, Elijah said. He knows I'm coming. Then this is suicide. Maybe. Elijah started moving deeper into the warehouse, staying low, using the stacked cargo for cover. But I've been dead before. It doesn't stick. The interior was massive, a cathedral of commerce and crime. Shipping containers were stacked 3 high, creating corridors and dead ends. Somewhere in the distance, Elijah heard voices, the beep of a forklift, the mechanical sound of legitimate business. But underneath it all, he sensed something darker, something that made his combat instincts scream warning. They moved through the shadows, Boone leading, because he knew the paths Elijah following, because he knew how to kill. The temperature dropped as they went deeper, and the smell changed, not just rust and oil anymore, but something organic, something wrong. What else is Langston running out of here? Elijah whispered. Boone didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was hollow. Everything. Drugs, weapons, stolen goods. But the big money, the real money, He trailed off. Say it. People. He's trafficking people. Boone stopped, turned to face Elijah. Mostly women and kids from Eastern Europe, South America. Brings them in through the port, moves them across the country. It's worth millions, and the whole damn system looks the other way because he pays them to. Elijah felt something cold settle in his chest. He'd known Langston was evil. You didn't get flagged for assassination without being evil. But this was different. This was industrial-scale human suffering packaged and sold like any other commodity. Where are they? Elijah asked quietly. I don't know. I never wanted to know. Boone looked sick. I took his money and I looked the other way, and God help me, I knew what that made me. But knowing and seeing are different things. Show me. That's not what we're here for. Elijah grabbed Boone's collar, pulled him close. Show me where he keeps them, or I'll put a bullet in your knee and find them myself. Something in Elijah's eyes must have convinced Boone he wasn't bluffing, because the cop's resistance collapsed. East Wing, sublevel, but it's guarded, and if we go down there, we're not getting to Langston. One thing at a time. Elijah released him. Move. They descended through a service stairwell, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead like dying stars. The temperature kept dropping and the smell grew stronger. Fear sweat unwashed bodies. Despair, given physical form. Elijah's jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. The sub-level corridor was painted institutional green and lit by harsh overhead lights. Two guards stood outside a heavy steel door, both armed with submachine guns. They looked bored playing cards on an overturned crate, not expecting trouble in the heart of Langston's empire. Elijah handed his rifle to Boone. Don't shoot me. What are you? But Elijah was already moving, walking straight toward the guards with his hands visible and empty. The guards looked up surprised, reaching for their weapons. Elijah closed the distance in 4 strides, and his hands became weapons themselves. The first guard took an elbow to the throat, crushing his windpipe before he could cry out. Elijah caught the falling submachine gun, reversed it, and slammed the stock into the second guard's temple. Both men dropped within 3 seconds, and the only sound was their bodies hitting the concrete floor. Christ, Boone whispered, emerging from the stairwell. You really are what they said you were. Elijah didn't respond. He was staring at the steel door, at the heavy locks, and the small window reinforced with wire mesh. Through that window, he could see shadows moving, could hear voices quiet, scared, speaking languages he didn't understand, but whose fear needed no translation. He found the key on one of the guards and opened the door. The room beyond was a nightmare given form. 50 people, maybe more, crammed into a space meant for cargo. Women, children, a few young men. They huddled on thin mattresses, their eyes hollow, their hope long since beaten out of them. Some looked up when Elijah entered, most didn't bother. Oh God, Boone breathed behind him. Oh God, I knew, but I didn't. A young woman near the door looked up at Elijah, her face bruised, her eyes ancient, despite her youth. She said something in a language he didn't speak, but he understood the question. Are you here to help or hurt? I'm here to help, Elijah said quietly, knowing she probably didn't understand English, but hoping his tone conveyed what words couldn't. He turned to Boone. Call it in. FBI, state police, anyone clean you can find. Tell them there's a human trafficking operation here, give them this location. They won't come. Langston owns... Not everyone. Elijah's voice was hard. There are still good cops out there. Find them. And if you can't, then you make the call anyway, and pray someone with a conscience picks up. Boone pulled out his phone, hands shaking, and started dialing. Elijah turned back to the people in the room, these victims of a system that had failed them, and made a silent promise. By the time the sun comes up, you'll be free. He was closing the door, securing it from the outside to keep them safe, when he heard footsteps. Not guards, wrong. Cadence, wrong weight. Someone running young and fast and afraid. A man in a police uniform came around the corner, gun drawn, but pointed at the floor, his face flushed and his eyes wide. He stopped when he saw Elijah standing over two unconscious guards, Boone on his phone, the evidence of violence and intent all around them. "Don't move!" The young cop shouted, his weapon coming up. "Drop the weapon and put your hands up!" Elijah still held the guard's submachine gun. He could drop this rookie before the kid got a shot off. 18 years of training and 12 years of combat made that a certainty. But something in the young cop's face stopped him. The kid was scared, yes, but he wasn't dirty. His eyes held the kind of idealism that hadn't been beaten out yet, the belief that the badge still meant something. "Easy," Elijah said, setting the weapon down slowly. "I'm not your enemy." "I know what I saw. You assaulted two guards. You're—" The rookie noticed Boone for the first time. "Sergeant, what's going on here?" Boone lowered his phone, his face ashen. "Reynolds, Jake, you shouldn't be here." "I'm doing my rounds. I heard a disturbance." Jake Reynolds kept his weapon trained on Elijah, but his attention was splitting between the scene before him and the door behind Elijah. "What's in that room?" "The truth," Elijah said quietly. "The truth about what Victor Langston really does here. The truth about how deep the corruption goes. The truth about what happens when good men look the other way." "He's crazy," Boone said quickly. "He broke in, assaulted these men." "Shut up, Sergeant." Jake's voice was harder now, and his gun shifted slightly to include Boone in its arc. "I've heard the rumors about you. About the money you never earned, the calls you take in the middle of the night. I wanted to believe they were just rumors." He looked at Elijah. "Who are you?" "Someone trying to do the right thing," Elijah answered. "And I need you to make a choice right now, Officer Reynolds. You can arrest me, follow procedure, and let this operation continue. Or you can look in that room behind me and see what you're really protecting." Jake hesitated, his weapon still raised, but his certainty wavering. "What's in the room? Open it and see." "It's nothing," Boone interjected desperately. "Storage, that's all." "Then you won't mind if I check." Jake moved toward the door, keeping his gun trained on Elijah, and peered through the wire-reinforced window. What he saw there drained the color from his face. His hand dropped slightly, his weapon lowering, as the reality of what he was looking at overwhelmed his training. "My God," he whispered. "Those are people. Those are kids." "Trafficking victims," Elijah confirmed. 53 of them by my count. Langston brings them in through the port, holds them here, ships them out to whoever pays. And every cop on his payroll, including your sergeant here, knows about it and does nothing." Jake turned to Boone, and the betrayal in his eyes was painful to witness. "Is this true?" Boone couldn't meet his gaze. "I didn't know it was this bad. I thought it was just... I didn't know." "You didn't want to know." Jake's voice was shaking now with rage or grief or both. "You took the money and you didn't ask questions because you didn't want to know. Kid, you don't understand how it works here. Langston owns this city. If you don't play along, then you fight." Jake's shout echoed off the concrete walls. "You fight or you quit, but you don't take blood money and pretend you're still a cop." Elijah watched the young officer's world collapse in real time, watched the idealism shatter against the rocks of reality. He'd seen it before in young soldiers who discovered that war wasn't noble, that the enemy wasn't always clear, that good men did terrible things for terrible reasons. "Officer Reynolds," Elijah said quietly, "I need to get to Langston. End this operation, shut it down permanently. But I can't do that if I'm in custody. So I'm asking you, as one man trying to do right by another, let me finish this." Jake looked at him, really looked, seeing past the homeless veteran exterior to something underneath. "Who are you really? Does it matter?" "Yeah, it does." Elijah was quiet for a moment, weighing the risk of truth against the necessity of action. "My name is Elijah Carter. I used to work for the government doing things they'd never admit to. Victor Langston was one of my targets. His brother was anyway. I killed Marcus Langston 3 years ago, and Victor's been looking for me ever since. Now he's threatening innocent people to draw me out. You're an assassin, Jake said flatly. I was. Now I'm just a man trying to stop a worse man from hurting more people. Jake stood there, his weapon still in his hand, the weight of the decision crushing down on his shoulders. He was 26 years old. Elijah had seen enough cops to guess, and his whole career, his whole worldview was being tested in this moment. Finally, Jake lowered his gun. I'm going with you. No, Elijah said immediately. You're going to stay here, guard these people, and wait for backup. I said I'm going with you. Jake's jaw was set. This is my city too. My badge might not mean much down here, but it still means something to me. If Langston's been operating under police protection, then a cop should be there when he falls. Elijah studied the young man, saw the determination in his eyes, and recognized something of his younger self in that expression. The believer, the idealist, the fool who thought one person could make a difference. Can you shoot? Elijah asked. Top of my class at the academy. Shooting paper targets isn't the same as shooting people. I know. Jake checked his service weapon, a Glock 17. But I'm still coming. Boone spoke up, his voice defeated. The FBI is on their way. I called an agent I knew from before I went bad. He's bringing a task force, but it'll take them 30 minutes to get here. 30 minutes, Elijah repeated. That was time Langston could use to evacuate, to destroy evidence, to kill witnesses. We need to move now, keep him contained until the FBI arrives. There's another problem, Boone said. I just got a text from one of Langston's people. They know you're here. They know about Reynolds, and they've... He looked at Jake, genuine regret in his eyes. They've got your family kid, your wife and daughter. They're using them as leverage. The color drained from Jake's face. Sarah, Emma, where are they? Langston's holding them in his office. Says you've got 10 minutes to bring Carter up there, or he starts hurting them. Time slowed down. Elijah felt the familiar calculation running through his mind. Variables, possibilities, odds. Langston had the high ground, had hostages, had overwhelming force. A direct assault would get everyone killed. But surrendering meant death for him and probably for Jake's family anyway. Langston didn't leave witnesses. There was a third option, one that required sacrifice, but it was there. Elijah could feel it taking shape in his mind, the way a shot lined up when all the math came together. I'll go, Elijah said. Alone. Tell Langston he can have me, but he releases Jake's family first. He won't do that, Boone said. He will if he wants me alive. Tell him I'll surrender, confess to killing his brother, let him have his revenge. But the family walks first. Jake grabbed Elijah's arm. You can't. He'll kill you. Probably. Elijah gently removed Jake's hand. But your wife and daughter will live. That's the math that matters. There has to be another way. There isn't. Elijah picked up the submachine gun, checked its magazine, then handed it to Jake. When the FBI gets here, you tell them everything. About the trafficking, about the corruption, about all of it. Make sure these people get free. He gestured toward the locked room. That's how you honor what your badge is supposed to mean. I'm not letting you die for my family. Jake said, his voice breaking. You're not letting me do anything, Officer Reynolds. I'm choosing this. Elijah met his eyes. I've taken 173 lives. Maybe saving yours makes the balance a little less impossible. He walked toward the stairs before Jake could argue further, Boone trailing behind like a ghost. The climb back to the main level felt longer than it should have, each step another moment toward what Elijah knew was coming. He'd always known, really, that his war would end like this, not in glory, not in peace, but in blood and sacrifice, and the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, his death would mean something. The main warehouse floor was different now. More guards, more tension, more weapons visible. They knew an enemy was inside, and they were ready. Elijah walked through them with his hands raised, the rifle slung over his shoulder by its strap, making himself visible, making himself the target. "Where is he?" one of the guards demanded, pressing a pistol to Elijah's head. "Taking me to Langston," Elijah said calmly. "He's expecting me." They searched him roughly, took the rifle, found the knife in his boot and the spare magazine in his pocket. They left him nothing but his clothes and his certainty. Then they marched him through the warehouse toward the metal stairs that led to the second-level offices, and Elijah climbed toward his reckoning. Victor Langston's office was exactly what Elijah expected: expensive furniture in a cheap space, the trappings of wealth imposed on industrial poverty. Langston himself stood behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than some people earned in a year, his suit immaculate, his face calm. He looked nothing like his brother Marcus, where Marcus had been rough and obvious. Victor was refined and subtle. But his eyes were the same. Cold. Dead. The eyes of a man who'd stopped seeing people as anything other than commodities or obstacles. Jake's wife and daughter sat on a leather couch against the wall, bound and gagged, but apparently unharmed. The little girl couldn't have been more than 4 years old, had tears streaming down her face. Her mother held her as close as the ropes allowed, her eyes fixed on the door with desperate hope. "Elijah Carter." Victor said, his accent making the name sound exotic. "The ghost becomes flesh. I've waited 3 years for this moment." "Let them go," Elijah said, ignoring the guns pointed at him from 6 different angles. "You've got me. That was the deal." "The deal?" Victor repeated, walking around his desk. "Yes, the deal where you surrender yourself for the lives of innocents. Very noble, very heroic. Are you trying to be a good man now, Carter? Trying to balance the scales?" "I'm trying to keep a little girl from watching her mother die. The scales don't balance. I know that." Victor studied him for a long moment, then gestured to his men. "Take them downstairs, put them in a car, and let them go." "Victor!" One of the guards started to protest. "Do it!" Victor snapped. "I gave my word. Even monsters have honor." They cut the ropes, removed the gags. Sarah Reynolds grabbed her daughter and ran for the door, pausing only long enough to look back at Elijah with gratitude and terror mixed in equal measure. Then they were gone, their footsteps echoing down the metal stairs, and Elijah was alone with the man who'd been hunting him. "Why?" Victor asked when the door closed. "Why did you kill my brother?" "Because I was ordered to." "That's not a reason, that's an excuse." "It's the only reason I have." Elijah met Victor's eyes. "Your brother was trafficking weapons to people who killed Americans. My government wanted him dead. I made him dead. That's what I did. That's what I was." "Was?" Victor moved closer. "You think you've changed? You think becoming a homeless drunk washes the blood from your hands? No. I know what I am, what I'll always be." "And what is that?" "A killer." Elijah said it without emotion, without pride or shame, just fact. "I'm good at it, better than anyone you've ever seen. Your brother had 12 bodyguards. I killed them all and him without raising an alarm. That's what I do. That's what I'm for." Victor pulled a pistol from his desk drawer, a gleaming silver thing that probably cost more than its weight in gold. "Then why did you surrender? Why didn't you kill your way up here, eliminate my men, put a bullet in my head?" "Because that little girl downstairs deserves a chance to grow up with her mother. Because I'm tired of killing. Because maybe just this once I wanted to choose differently." How philosophical. Victor chambered around. "My brother was more than a target to me, Carter. He was family. The only family I had left after our parents died in a factory fire when we were children. We built this empire together from nothing through blood and will, and you erased him like he was nothing." "I'm sorry," Elijah said, and meant it. "Sorry." Victor laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sorry. The ghost sniper is sorry. Does that bring Marcus back? Does that undo 3 years of grief?" No, but it's true anyway. Victor raised the pistol, and Elijah didn't flinch. This was always how it was going to end. He'd known it the moment he decided to come here to face this man, to choose saving lives over saving himself. The math was simple. His death bought freedom for Jake's family, bought time for the FBI to arrive, bought hope for those 53 people locked in the basement. One life for many. The same math he'd used as a sniper, but inverted. For once, he was the target, not the weapon. Any last words? Victor asked, his finger tightening on the trigger. Yeah. Elijah smiled cold and hard. You should have checked the roof. Victor's expression changed, confusion flickering across his face, and Elijah moved. Not to attack, he was too far away, too outgunned, but to drop, to hit the floor, to get low as the office windows exploded inward, and gunfire erupted from above. Because Elijah had lied. Not about surrendering, not about the choice he'd made, but about being alone. Jake Reynolds had made his own choice, and the young cop who'd been taught to shoot at the academy had made every shot count. Glass and chaos rained down in equal measure. Jake's first shot took out the guard nearest the window, and the second caught another in the shoulder before they even understood what was happening. Elijah rolled behind Victor's mahogany desk as bullets tore through the office, punching holes in walls and furniture, turning the space into a kill zone. Victor dove for cover, his expensive suit getting tangled with overturned chairs. His men were shouting, returning fire blindly toward the roof, their training abandoned in favor of panic. Elijah used the confusion, grabbing a fallen guard's pistol and putting 2 rounds into the nearest threat. The man dropped, and Elijah kept moving, kept low, his body remembering what his mind had tried to forget. Fall back! Victor was screaming. Get to the stairs! But falling back meant running into Jake's line of fire, and the young cop had positioned himself perfectly. Every time a guard tried to retreat through the door, precise shots drove them back. The kid had listened when Elijah taught him the fundamentals in those 30 seconds on the stairs. Control your breathing, lead the target, make every bullet count. Elijah reached Victor's position behind a filing cabinet, grabbed him by his expensive collar, and hauled him up. The pistol pressed against Victor's temple was steady despite the chaos. Call them off, Elijah growled. Call them off, or you die right now. You won't, Victor gasped. You surrendered to save that family. You're trying to be a hero. I'm trying to be less of a monster, Elijah corrected. There's a difference, and killing you qualifies either way. Victor must have seen the truth in his eyes because his resistance crumbled. Stand down, he shouted to his remaining men. Hold your fire. The gunfire slowed, then stopped. The office was a wreck, smoke hanging in the air like fog, brass casings littering the floor, the smell of cordite and blood thick enough to taste. 3 guards were down, 2 more were wounded, and the rest had their weapons trained on Elijah, but their eyes on their boss. Drop it, one of them said, a big man with a scar across his jaw. Drop the gun, or we light you both up. Then you'd better shoot straight, Elijah replied calmly. Because if I go down, he's coming with me. The standoff held for 3 heartbeats. Then the building's fire alarm erupted, strobes flashing, the piercing shriek designed to clear the building. Jake had pulled it smart, kid, adding more chaos to the chaos, giving the FBI a reason to breach immediately. In the confusion of noise and flashing lights, Elijah saw his moment. He shoved Victor toward his men, dove for the window, and went through what remained of the glass. The drop to the warehouse floor was 15 feet, and he hit the concrete in a roll that sent pain screaming through his already damaged ribs. But he was moving before the guards above could react, sprinting for the nearest cover, as bullets chewed up the floor behind him. All units, FBI. The voice boomed through the warehouse, amplified by megaphones. This is a federal raid. Drop your weapons and get on the ground. The cavalry had arrived, but the building was a maze, and Langston still had the upper hand. His men scattered like roaches when the lights came on, some surrendering, some fighting, some trying to escape through exits that were already being covered. The warehouse became a battlefield, pockets of resistance fighting desperate holding actions against federal agents with body armor and training. Elijah moved through it all like smoke, his stolen pistol leading the way. He wasn't trying to escape, he was hunting. Victor Langston was the head of this operation, and the head needed to be cut off, or the body would just regenerate somewhere else. He'd seen it 100 times overseas. Take out the lieutenants, and the warlord survives, builds a new army, starts the cycle again. He found Victor's trail by following the gunfire. The crime lord was making for a back exit protected by his remaining loyal guards cutting through the warehouse toward freedom. Elijah paralleled their movement using the stacked cargo containers for cover, reading their pattern, anticipating their route. The rear loading dock was Langston's goal. Elijah saw it now, saw the armored SUV waiting there, with its engine running, saw the escape route that had probably been planned for exactly this scenario. 3 guards formed a protective cordon around Victor as they moved professional and focused despite the chaos behind them. Elijah dropped from the top of a container, landing in their path. His first shot took the lead guard in the chest center mass, dropping him instantly. The second guard got his weapon up, but Elijah's shot found his throat. The third man was smarter, used Victor as a shield, his gun pressed against the crime lord's head. "Back off!" the guard shouted. "Back off or he dies." "He dies anyway." Elijah set his pistol steady. "That's the only ending this story has. But you can walk away. Drop the gun, get on the ground when the FBI gets here, take your chances with the justice system." "I'm not going to prison." "Then you're going to die." Elijah's voice was flat, emotionless. "Your choice. 5 seconds." The guard's eyes flickered, calculating weighing odds. In that microsecond of distraction, Victor moved. He was softer than his brother, less physically capable, but survival instinct made him fast. He threw himself backward into the guard, disrupting his aim, and Elijah's shot caught the man in the shoulder. The guard went down, and Victor ran for the SUV. Elijah pursued, his legs pumping despite the pain in his ribs, despite the exhaustion that was starting to creep in around the edges. He was 53 years old, and he'd been living rough for 3 years, and his body was reminding him of every day of it. But he'd run farther, hurt worse, pushed harder when it mattered. Victor reached the SUV, yanked the door open. Elijah was 20 feet away when a shape emerged from the vehicle's interior, a man in tactical gear moving fast, weapon coming up. Elijah recognized him in the instant before the muzzle flash, Marcus Bishop, his old spotter, his best friend from the Ghost Team days. The man who'd saved his life in Helmand, who'd pulled him out of Beirut, who'd let him disappear when the military wanted him locked in a psych ward. But Bishop's rifle wasn't aimed at Elijah. It was aimed at Victor. "Get down!" Bishop shouted, and Elijah dropped as the rifle barked 3 times. Victor Langston jerked with each impact, his expensive suit blooming red, his eyes wide with shock and betrayal. He fell against the SUV and slid down, leaving a smear of blood on the pristine paint. Elijah rose slowly, his pistol trained on Bishop out of pure instinct. "What are you doing here?" "Saving your dumb ass," Bishop replied, lowering his weapon. "You think I wasn't keeping tabs on you? You think I didn't know what happened when that cop ran your face?" He was older than Elijah remembered, more gray in his hair, more lines around his eyes, but the same sharp intelligence lived there. "Called in some favors, pulled together what I could. Got here as fast as I could." "You shot him," Elijah said, looking at Victor's body. The crime lord was still breathing, barely blood bubbling from his lips. "He was going for a gun. I saw it in the vehicle." Bishop gestured toward the SUV's interior where a pistol lay on the passenger seat. "You've gone soft, brother. You would have seen it 3 years ago." "Maybe. Probably." Elijah moved to Victor's side, knelt down. The man's eyes found his, full of pain and rage and fading awareness. "You killed us both," Victor whispered, blood flecking his lips. "My brother and me." "Yeah," Elijah said quietly. "I did. Was it worth it?" All those lives you took. All that death. Elijah had no answer. He'd asked himself that question every night for 3 years and never found one that satisfied. So he just knelt there as Victor Langston's breathing got shallower, as the light faded from his eyes, as another name got added to the list that lived in Elijah's head. "We need to move," Bishop set his hand on Elijah's shoulder. "FBI sweeping the building. They'll be here in minutes." "Let them come," Elijah said, standing. "It's over. Let them come." "It's not over." Bishop pulled out a tablet, showed Elijah a series of photographs and documents. Langston wasn't working alone. He had partners, city officials, judges, even state senators. And there's someone above him, someone pulling strings. This thing goes deeper than one arms dealer in one city. "That's not my problem anymore." "Bullshit." Bishop's voice hardened. "You know it is. You know what happens if we don't finish this. The network adapts, finds new people, starts up somewhere else. Nothing changes except the names of the victims." Before Elijah could respond, Jake Reynolds appeared around the corner of a shipping container, his service weapon drawn, his face flushed from exertion. He took in the scene: Victor's body, the blood, Bishop's tactical gear, and his weapon came up. "Don't move," Jake said, his voice shaking slightly. "Both of you." "Easy, kid," Bishop said. "We're the good guys here." "I don't know that. I don't know anything anymore." Jake's eyes found Elijah. "You lied to me. About surrendering. About going alone." "I didn't lie," Elijah said. "I made a choice. You made a different one. I couldn't just let you die." "Why not?" "You don't know me. I'm nobody to you." "You're not nobody." Jake's weapon lowered slightly. "You saved my family. My wife, my daughter. They're alive because you chose them over yourself. That makes you somebody." The words hit harder than Elijah expected. In 3 years of being invisible, of being nothing and nobody, he'd forgotten what it felt like to matter to someone. The weight of that recognition was almost unbearable. "Your family's safe?" Elijah asked. "They're with the FBI. Safe. Scared, but safe." Jake holstered his weapon. "They found the victims in the basement, 53 people. They're processing them now, getting them medical attention, starting the paperwork to get them home. Because of what you did." 53 lives. Maybe that balanced the scales a little. Maybe not. But it was something. It was more than Elijah had given the world in a long time. The FBI arrived then, a flood of agents in body armor and tactical gear, securing the scene with professional efficiency. They found Elijah Bishop and Jake standing over Victor Langston's body, and for a moment weapons were raised, commands were shouted, tension ratcheted up toward violence. But Jake stepped forward, his badge visible, his voice calm. "Stand down. These men are witnesses. They helped end this operation." "Officer Reynolds." A woman in an FBI windbreaker approached, her salt and pepper hair pulled back severely, her eyes sharp and assessing. "I'm Special Agent Sarah Chen. We spoke on the phone." "Yes, ma'am." Jake gestured to Elijah and Bishop. "These men, I know who they are." Chen's gaze fixed on Elijah with uncomfortable intensity. "Elijah Carter, Ghost Team Operator, listed as deceased in 2022. "I got better," Elijah said flatly. "And Marcus Bishop, also deceased, also apparently recovered from death." Chen's expression was unreadable. "We're going to need to have a very long conversation about what happened here tonight. But first," she turned to her team, "secure the building. Process every piece of evidence. I want documentation on every victim, every piece of contraband, every name in every ledger. This operation ends tonight, but the investigation is just beginning." The agents dispersed and Chen turned back to Elijah. "You've created quite a mess, Mr. Carter. Killed or injured at least 8 people, exposed a major trafficking operation, and apparently risen from the dead to do it. Care to explain?" "Not particularly," Elijah said. "But I'll give you the basics. Victor Langston was trafficking people. His operation was protected by corrupt police and city officials. I came here to stop him. He's stopped." By dying from gunshot wounds you inflicted. By dying from gunshot wounds Marcus Bishop inflicted. Elijah corrected. In defense of my life as I was pursuing a fleeing suspect. Chen's eyebrow raised. That's your story. That's the truth. The truth is rarely simple with men like you. She pulled out a notebook. But I'll hear it anyway, from the beginning. They spent the next hour in a makeshift interrogation area, a cleared section of the warehouse surrounded by FBI personnel and evidence markers. Elijah told her everything. The beating by Boone and his squad, the contract on his life, the discovery of the trafficking victims, the assault on the building. He left out only the details that didn't matter. The years before the missions overseas, the reasons he'd become a ghost in the first place. Jake corroborated the story, his young face serious as he recounted what he'd seen, what he'd done, what he'd witnessed. Bishop added technical details, filled in the gaps, provided context that made the narrative complete. When they were done, Chen closed her notebook and studied all three of them with an expression that might have been respect, or might have been suspicion, or might have been both. This is the biggest human trafficking bust in U.S. history, she said finally. 53 victims recovered, evidence of at least 200 more who passed through this facility in the last 3 years, files that implicate 27 public officials in corruption charges, all because a homeless veteran decided to fight back. All because Jake Reynolds decided to be a real cop, Elijah corrected, nodding toward the young officer. He made the call. He brought you here. I just created the circumstances. By killing people. By ending a threat to innocent lives. Elijah met her gaze steadily. I won't apologize for that. I'm not asking you to. Chen stood. But I am asking you to understand that there will be consequences. Questions. Investigations. You've spent 3 years being nobody, Mr. Carter. That anonymity just ended. I know. Do you... She leaned closer, her voice dropping. Because the people you worked for, the ones who erased you from the system, they're going to have questions too. And they don't ask nicely. Let them come, Elijah said. I'm tired of running. Chen studied him for another long moment, then nodded. Get yourself checked by the paramedics. You're bleeding, and you probably have broken ribs. After that... She paused. After that, I suggest you find a good lawyer and a better hiding place. Because this story is going to break, and when it does, you'll have a lot of people looking for you. She walked away, leaving Elijah with Bishop and Jake in the growing chaos of a federal crime scene. Emergency lights painted the warehouse in alternating red and blue, and the sound of voices, victims being processed. Agents giving orders, the machinery of justice grinding into motion, filled the air. She's right, Bishop said quietly. You need to disappear again. Deeper this time. I'm done disappearing. Then you're going to die. For real this time. Bishop's voice was urgent. You think this ends with Langston? He was just one node in a network. The Revenant Order, that's what they call themselves. International criminal syndicate, ties to intelligence agencies and organized crime across 3 continents. Victor's brother Marcus was part of it. Now they know you're alive, and they know you're a threat. The Revenant Order, Elijah repeated. The name stirred something in his memory, fragments of mission briefings from years ago, targets he'd eliminated without understanding the larger context. You're telling me I've been fighting ghosts? No. I'm telling you that you're fighting an organization that makes ghosts out of people who oppose them. Bishop pulled up more information on his tablet. Look, Victor Wolf. Victor Langston's real name was Viktor Volkov, Russian immigrant, but with connections that go deep into Eastern European crime families. The Revenant Order has been operating for 20 years, moving money weapons people. They're everywhere and nowhere. Why are you telling me this? Elijah asked. Why do you care? Because I'm tired too, brother. Tired of watching good people get chewed up by bad systems. Tired of knowing the truth and being told to look the other way. Bishop's expression was haunted. After I pulled you out of Beirut, I started digging, started asking questions about the missions we ran, the targets we eliminated, and I found something, a pattern. Almost everything we did, every target, every mission somehow benefited the Revenant Order. We weren't fighting terrorists. We were eliminating their competition. The words hit Elijah like a physical blow. That's not possible. We worked for the U.S. government. We worked for people inside the government who had their own agenda. Bishop's voice was bitter. Black Ops funding has to come from somewhere, Elijah. And sometimes it comes from partnerships with the exact people we're supposed to be fighting. We were tools. Weapons pointed at problems that needed solving, never told who was really pulling the trigger. Elijah wanted to deny it, wanted to reject the implication that everything he'd done, every life he'd taken, had been part of some larger corruption. But he'd seen too much, lived too long in the shadows, to be naive about how the world really worked. "So, what do we do?" he asked quietly. "We fight back. For real this time." Bishop's eyes held a fierce determination. "I've been building a team. People like us operators who got burned, analysts who saw too much, agents who refused to look the other way. We go after the Revenant Order. Cut off their heads, burn down their operations, expose the corruption. No government sanction, no official backing. Just us doing what's right." "That's suicide," Elijah said. But even as he spoke, he felt something stirring inside him. Purpose. Direction. A reason to be something other than a ghost haunting the streets. "Maybe," Bishop admitted. "But it's better than dying slowly in an alley somewhere. Better than pretending we're not still soldiers, still warriors, still capable of making a difference." Jake spoke up, his voice tentative. "Could you use another person? Someone who knows this city, who has access to police resources?" Both men turned to look at him. The young cop stood there, his uniform dirty and torn, his face smudged with smoke and determination. "Kid," Bishop said gently, "you've got a wife and daughter. You've got a life ahead of you that doesn't include fighting shadow wars against international criminals." "I've also got a conscience," Jake replied. "And after tonight, after seeing what I've seen, I can't just go back to writing traffic tickets and pretending the world is safe. My family is only safe as long as people like you are fighting people like Langston. So let me help. Let me be part of the solution." Elijah saw himself in Jake's eyes, younger, idealistic, believing that one person could make a difference. That belief had gotten Elijah through 12 years of hell. And when it finally broke, when he finally stopped believing, he'd become nothing. Maybe it was time to believe again. "We'll talk," Elijah said. "After things settle. After the dust clears. If you still want in, we'll talk." Jake nodded, satisfied for now, and turned to go deal with the FBI agents who were calling for him. That left Elijah alone with Bishop, two ghosts standing in the ruins of an operation they'd helped destroy. "I need medical attention," Elijah said, feeling the adrenaline start to fade, feeling the pain rush in to fill the space it left. His ribs were screaming, his vision was starting to blur at the edges, and he was pretty sure he was bleeding from somewhere important. "Yeah, you do." Bishop caught him as he stumbled. "Come on, brother, let's get you patched up." The paramedics were efficient and professional, cutting away his shirt, revealing the purple-black bruises that covered his torso like a map of recent violence. 2 cracked ribs, multiple contusions, minor lacerations, and early-stage hypothermia from exposure. They wanted to take him to the hospital, but Elijah refused. Hospitals meant records, records meant questions, and questions meant the kind of attention he couldn't afford. They compromised on a field treatment, bandages, pain medication, antibiotics, and strict instructions to rest. Elijah accepted it all, knowing he wouldn't follow half of it. Rest was a luxury for people who weren't being hunted. Dawn was breaking when the FBI finally released them. Chen made it clear they'd be wanted for further questioning. Made it clear they were persons of interest in multiple investigations, made it clear that leaving the city would be considered suspicious. But she also made it clear in the tone more than the words that she understood what they'd done and why, and that not all laws served justice. Bishop had a safe house, a forgettable apartment in a forgettable neighborhood where they could regroup and plan. Elijah sat on a worn couch while Bishop made coffee and for the first time in 3 years, allowed himself to think about the future instead of just surviving the present. "I can't stay here," Elijah said. "You know that, right? Too many people know I'm alive now. Too many questions coming." "I know." Bishop handed him a mug of coffee, black and bitter. "I've got a place. Off the grid. Mountain country, secure, defensible. We can operate from there. Build the team, start making plans." "You've really thought this through." "I've had 3 years to think about it." Bishop sat across from him. 3 years watching the world get worse while I did nothing. I'm done with nothing, Elijah. I want to fight back. And I want you to fight with me. Elijah sipped the coffee, felt its warmth spread through him, and considered the offer. He could refuse. Could disappear again deeper this time, maybe find some small town where nobody would look for him. Could die alone and unmourned, just another forgotten soldier who'd given everything and gotten nothing back. Or he could fight. Could be a weapon one more time, but this time aimed at targets he chose for reasons he believed in, alongside people who understood what he'd sacrificed. "I'm in," Elijah said quietly, "but on one condition." "Name it." "We protect the people I left behind. Rita, Marcus, Tommy, the folks at the shelter. They're innocent in all this, and if the Revenant Order comes looking for revenge, they'll be targets." "Already done," Bishop said. "I've got a team watching them. Best security money can buy, completely invisible. They're safe." Elijah nodded, satisfied, and drank more coffee. His body hurt. His soul hurt, everything hurt. But underneath it all, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. Direction. A reason to be more than just a ghost. The sun rose over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, and Elijah Carter watched it through the window of Bishop's safe house. Somewhere out there, 53 people were getting their lives back. Somewhere out there, Jake Reynolds was going home to his family. Somewhere out there, the Revenant Order was learning that they'd awakened something they couldn't control. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. But this time, Elijah was fighting for the right reasons. This time, he was choosing his battles. This time, he was more than just a weapon. He was a soldier again. And soldiers didn't give up. They didn't surrender. They fought until the fight was won, or they couldn't fight anymore. Elijah intended to fight for a long time. 3 days passed in a blur of federal interviews, news coverage, and the slow unraveling of Victor Langston's criminal empire. Elijah watched it all from Bishop's safe house. His ribs wrapped tight, pain medication dulling the sharper edges, but leaving everything else crystal clear. The story had exploded across every news channel, the biggest human trafficking bust in U.S. history. Corruption reaching into the highest levels of city government, a homeless veteran who'd become an unlikely hero. They were calling him the Ghost of Hope, which made Elijah want to laugh or vomit. He wasn't sure which. Heroes were supposed to be clean, supposed to stand in the light without casting shadows. Elijah was all shadows always had been, always would be. But the narrative needed someone to celebrate, and he was convenient. "You're trending on social media," Bishop said from his laptop, amusement coloring his voice. "#1 worldwide. There's a hashtag and everything." "Kill me now," Elijah muttered, staring at his coffee like it held answers. "Too late. You're already dead, remember?" Bishop turned the screen toward him, showing headlines from major news outlets. "CNN's calling you a symbol of redemption. Fox News wants to know why a highly trained operator was living on the streets. The progressive blogs are using you to talk about veteran homelessness and systemic failure. Everyone's using me for something." Elijah pushed the laptop away. "That's what people do with weapons. Use them and put them away when they're done." Bishop's expression softened. "You're not a weapon anymore, brother. You're a man who made a choice, who saved lives. That's different." "Is it?" Elijah touched his bandaged ribs, feeling the ache beneath. "Because it felt pretty familiar. The violence, the killing, the math of trading lives. Only difference is, this time I was the sacrifice instead of making someone else be one. The difference is choice. Bishop insisted. Before you were following orders. This time you chose your own path. That matters. Maybe it did. Elijah wasn't sure yet. The moral calculus of his life was too complicated to balance in 3 days of reflection. But he knew one thing: sitting in this apartment doing nothing while people's lives hung in the balance felt wrong. He'd spent 3 years as a ghost, and he was done haunting. "Show me what you've got on the Revenant Order," Elijah said, sitting up despite the protest from his ribs. "Everything." Bishop pulled up files, spreading them across the coffee table like a hand of cards dealt by fate. Photographs of faces, documents in multiple languages, organizational charts that looked like spiderwebs connecting continents. At the center of it all was a single name: Victor Wolf. Victor Volkov. Bishop began tapping a photo of a man in his 50s, silver-haired and distinguished-looking. Born in St. Petersburg, immigrated to the U.S. in the 90s during the chaos after the Soviet collapse. Officially, he's a legitimate businessman, import-export real estate venture capital. Unofficially, he runs the Revenant Order. And Victor Langston was his brother, Elijah said, studying the photo. The resemblance was there if you looked for it: the same cold eyes, the same set to the jaw. Half-brother, same father, different mothers. The father was KGB, connected to organized crime, taught both boys the family business before he was killed in a power struggle. Bishop pulled up more documents. Victor took the lessons and built an empire. The Revenant Order isn't just criminals, it's a network that penetrates legitimate business intelligence agencies' political structures. They're ghosts operating in plain sight. And we took out one of his operations, Elijah said. That makes us targets. More than targets. You killed his brother 3 years ago, then destroyed his trafficking network and exposed his corruption web. Victor's not just going to kill you, Elijah. He's going to make an example of you. Let him try. Elijah's voice was flat, emotionless. I've been hunted by worse. Have you? Bishop leaned forward. Because the Revenant Order has resources we never faced in the military. They've got people in the CIA, FBI, DOD. They've got private military contractors, intelligence analysts, hackers. And they've got something else: patience. They'll wait years if they have to, but they never forget. Then we don't give them years, Elijah said. We go after them first. Hit them hard, hit them fast, dismantle the organization before they can retaliate. That's suicide. You said that about the warehouse, and we're still here. Elijah met Bishop's eyes. I'm done running Marcus. Done hiding. Done being afraid. If they want war, we'll give them war. But this time, we fight on our terms. The apartment door opened, and Jake Reynolds walked in carrying bags of takeout food. The young cop looked different, older somehow, the idealism in his eyes tempered by the reality of what he'd seen and done. He'd been placed on administrative leave pending investigation, but Agent Chen had made it clear he'd be cleared. Self-defense, protection of others, all the right boxes checked. Chinese food, Jake announced, setting the bags on the kitchen counter. Figured we all needed something other than Bishop's terrible coffee. My coffee's fine, Bishop protested, but he was already moving toward the food. They ate in comfortable silence. 3 men who'd been through hell together and come out the other side, changed. Elijah watched. Jake saw the way his hands shook slightly when he thought no one was looking, saw the shadows that hadn't been there before. The kid had killed someone in that warehouse, the guard who'd been about to execute Elijah. That kind of thing left marks. You doing okay? Elijah asked quietly. Jake looked up, surprised by the question. Yeah. No. I don't know. He set down his fork. I keep seeing him. The man I shot. Keep wondering if there was another way, if I could have just wounded him if... There wasn't, Elijah said firmly. He was going to kill me, then probably you. You did what had to be done. Does it get easier? The knowing. Elijah wanted to lie. Wanted to tell the kid that time healed all wounds and the guilt would fade. But Jake deserved the truth. No, it stays with you. Every one of them stays with you. But you learn to carry it, learn to live with the weight. And you remember why you did it: to protect others, to stop evil, to be the barrier between the innocent and the predators. Is that what we are? Jake's voice was small. Barriers. We're what we choose to be, Bishop interjected, and the three of us have chosen to stand against people who trade in human suffering. That's not nothing. Jake nodded, slowly processing, and Elijah saw the moment when the young cop made his decision. Saw the steel enter his spine, saw him accept the weight, and choose to carry it anyway. I'm in, Jake said. Whatever you're planning, whatever comes next, I'm in. My wife knows. We talked about it. She's scared, but she understands. Some things are worth fighting for. Your family, Elijah started. We'll be protected, Jake interrupted. Bishop already arranged for security, and Sarah's tougher than she looks. She's a nurse, worked ER for 5 years. She's seen what happens when good people do nothing. She won't ask me to be one of those people. Elijah felt something shift in his chest, some wall he'd built around his heart 3 years ago starting to crack. These men, Bishop with his loyalty and Jake with his courage, were offering him something he'd thought he'd lost forever: brotherhood. Purpose. A reason to be more than just a ghost. Then we need a plan, Elijah said, pulling the documents back toward him. Victor Wolf won't wait for us to get organized. He's probably already mobilizing his people, gathering intelligence, preparing his response. We need to hit him before he hits us. They spent the next 4 hours building a strategy, mapping out Victor's known operations, identifying vulnerable points in his network. The Revenant Order was vast, but Bishop had been gathering intelligence for 3 years. He knew where the bodies were buried, sometimes literally. There's a meeting, Bishop said, pointing to a calendar notation. 3 weeks from now. Victor hosts it annually at his estate in Montana, off the grid, heavily secured, completely private. All the major players in the Revenant Order attend. It's their version of a board meeting. That's our target, Elijah said immediately. We go there, we take them all down at once, cut off all the heads. It's impossible, Jake said, studying the satellite images of Victor's estate. Look at this place. It's a fortress. Guards, surveillance, defensible terrain. We'd need an army. Or 3 very skilled operatives and a good plan. Elijah smiled, cold and predatory. I've hit harder targets with less support. And this time we're not constrained by rules of engagement or political considerations. We do whatever it takes. That's a suicide mission, Jake protested. Even if we somehow get in, we'd never get out. Maybe. Elijah looked at both men. I'm not going to lie to you, this is dangerous. More dangerous than anything we faced at the warehouse. But if we do nothing, how many more people suffer? How many more victims get trafficked? How many more corrupt systems stay in place because we were too afraid to act? The room was quiet, except for the hum of Bishop's laptop and the distant sound of traffic outside. Elijah could see the calculation happening in their eyes, the weight of risk versus the necessity of action. I'm in, Bishop said finally. Hell, I've been in. This is what I've been building toward. Jake took longer, his jaw working as he thought it through. Finally he nodded. My daughter's 4 years old. I want her to grow up in a world where monsters don't win. If that means I have to become a monster to fight them, then that's what I'll do. You're not a monster, Elijah said gently. None of us are. We're just men doing hard things for the right reasons. Is there a difference? Jake's question echoed Elijah's own doubts. Yeah, there is. Elijah stood, ignoring the pain in his ribs. Monsters enjoy the violence. We do it because there's no other choice. That line might seem thin, but it's everything. Over the next 2 weeks they prepared. Bishop reached out to old contacts, pulled together equipment and intelligence. Elijah spent hours studying Victor's estate, memorizing patrol patterns, identifying weaknesses, running scenarios. Jake trained with them, learning the skills he'd need to survive what was coming. Advanced marksmanship, close quarters, combat, tactical movement in hostile territory. The news coverage began to die down, replaced by other stories, Other tragedies, the endless cycle of human suffering and brief attention. The trafficking victims were being processed through the system, getting medical care and legal assistance. Most would be deported back to their home countries, though some would stay and testify against the officials who'd been charged with corruption. Agent Chen visited the safe house on day 12, her expression unreadable. "We've arrested 23 public officials," she said without preamble. "From beat cops to a deputy mayor. The whole system is in chaos. People are calling it the biggest corruption scandal in city history." "Good," Elijah said. "Chaos creates opportunity for change. It also creates opportunity for revenge." Chen pulled out a folder. "We've intercepted communications indicating that Victor Wolf is planning something. We don't know what, but there's chatter about making an example and sending a message. You three need to be careful." "We're always careful," Bishop said. "Are you?" Chen's eyes were sharp. "Because careful people don't plan to assault a fortified compound owned by one of the world's most dangerous criminals." Elijah and Bishop exchanged glances. They'd been discreet, but apparently not discreet enough. "How did you?" Elijah started. "I'm FBI," Chen interrupted. "It's my job to know things, and what I know is that Victor Wolf's estate is under federal surveillance. Has been for 2 years. We've been building a case, gathering evidence. Your attack would compromise everything. Or it would force your hand," Elijah countered. "You've been watching for 2 years, and you still don't have enough to move. How many more people die while you're gathering evidence?" Chen's jaw tightened. "The law is slow, but it's thorough. We do things the right way." "The right way doesn't always work." Elijah stood facing her directly. "I've seen it fail too many times. Bad people using good laws to protect themselves while innocent people suffer. Sometimes you need someone willing to work outside the law to get justice. That's vigilantism. That's survival." Elijah's voice was hard. "You want to arrest Victor Wolf, fine. Do it. But if you can't, if the system fails again, then don't stand in the way of people who can act." The tension in the room was palpable. Chen stared at Elijah, and he stared back, neither willing to blink first. Finally, she pulled out a small USB drive and set it on the table. "This conversation never happened," she said quietly. "And I never gave you this drive, which contains detailed surveillance of Victor's estate guard rotations, building layouts, and communication frequencies." She headed for the door, then paused. "You've got 3 weeks before that meeting. After that, we're moving in regardless. If you're going to do something stupid, do it before then." She left, and the 3 men stared at the USB drive like it was a live grenade. "She just gave us classified intel," Jake said, disbelief coloring his voice. "She gave us a choice," Bishop corrected, plugging the drive into his laptop. "Help us or get out of the way. Looks like she chose help." The data on the drive was gold, everything they'd need to plan a successful infiltration. Guard schedules, security systems, even the guest list for Victor's meeting. 57 of the world's worst criminals in one place at one time. It was almost too perfect. "It's a trap," Elijah said, studying the data. "Has to be. Victor knows we're coming." "Probably," Bishop agreed. "But it's also an opportunity. We've got inside intel now. We can plan for the trap, turn it against him. Or we walk into it and die." Jake's voice was steady despite the words. "Either way, at least we tried." Elijah looked at both men, his brother in arms, and the young cop who'd found his courage, and felt something he hadn't felt in years: pride. Not in himself, but in them. In what they represented. The stubborn, foolish, beautiful human impulse to stand against darkness, even when the odds were impossible. "We're going to need a 4th, Elijah said. "Someone with technical expertise. Can you get us a hacker?" "I know someone," Bishop said. "Former NSA got burned when she wouldn't play along with illegal surveillance programs. She's been looking for a way to hit back. Bring her in. We've got 2 weeks to become a team." The woman who showed up 3 days later was not what Elijah expected. Mid-30s athletic build with black hair streaked with blue and eyes that missed nothing. She introduced herself as Alex Chen, no relation to the FBI agent, and within 5 minutes had identified 3 security vulnerabilities in Bishop's safe house that could have gotten them all killed. "You're sloppy," she said bluntly, pulling out electronic devices and sweeping for bugs. "Amateur hour. If I can find you this easily, so can Victor's people." "Can you help us?" Elijah asked. "Can I break into a heavily fortified estate bypass military-grade security systems and disable communications for 57 professional criminals while keeping you 3 cowboys alive?" Alex smiled. "Yeah, I can do that. Question is, can you keep up with me?" They spent the final week training together, learning each other's rhythms, building the kind of trust that only comes from shared risk. Alex proved herself brilliant, but reckless. Jake was steady and reliable. Bishop was the experienced hand, and Elijah was the weapon they'd point at the heart of the Revenant Order. The night before they left, Elijah made one final trip. Back to the shelter where he'd lived, back to the people who'd been his family when he had nothing. Rita was there, her angels quieter since the shelter had gotten a sudden influx of funding from an anonymous donor. Marcus was cleaner on medication that helped with his PTSD. Tommy had been placed in a group home given a real chance at life. "You look different," Rita said, studying Elijah with those eyes that saw more than they should. "Less haunted." "Maybe," Elijah admitted. "Or maybe just differently haunted." "The angels say you're going to war." She touched his hand gently. "They say not everyone comes back from war." "Your angels are smart." "They say something else too." Rita smiled, sad and knowing. "They say some people are meant to fight. That's their purpose, their calling. You tried to run from it, but it found you anyway. Maybe that's not a curse. Maybe it's a gift." "Fighting as a gift," Elijah said. "That's a dark way to look at salvation." "Sometimes salvation is dark." Rita squeezed his hand. "Go do what you need to do. But remember, you're more than just a weapon. You're a person who cares. That's what makes you dangerous to people like them." Elijah left the shelter as dawn broke, Rita's words echoing in his mind. He'd spent 3 years trying to be nobody, trying to erase the soldier, the sniper, the weapon. But maybe that had been the wrong approach. Maybe the answer wasn't to stop being those things, but to choose when and why to be them. The team gathered at a private airfield on the outskirts of the city. A small plane waited, chartered under a false name, ready to take them to Montana. To Victor Wolf. To the Revenant Order. To whatever ending this story demanded. Bishop handed out equipment, weapons, communications gear, tactical supplies. Alex triple-checked her electronic warfare equipment. Jake held his service weapon like a talisman, his knuckles white. And Elijah stood at the edge of the tarmac watching the sun rise over a city that had broken him and rebuilt him in equal measure. "You ready?" Bishop asked, coming to stand beside him. "No," Elijah admitted. "But I'm going anyway. That's the only kind of ready that matters." They boarded the plane, and as it lifted off, Elijah looked down at the city growing smaller beneath them. 3 weeks ago, he'd been nobody, a homeless veteran waiting to die. Now he was part of something again. Part of a team, a mission, a purpose. Victor Wolf was waiting in Montana, and the Revenant Order would be there with him. But so would Elijah Carter, the ghost sniper who'd killed 173 people and saved 53 more. The man who'd died and come back. The weapon who'd learned to choose his own targets. The war ahead would be brutal. People would die, maybe all of them. But they'd die fighting for something that mattered against an enemy that deserved their fury. And in the end, wasn't that all any soldier could ask for? To fight the right fight, for the right reasons, alongside the right people. Elijah closed his eyes as the plane climbed higher, and for the first time in 3 years, he didn't see the faces of the dead when the darkness came. He saw the faces of the living. The 53 victims they'd saved, Jake's wife and daughter, safe at home. Rita and Marcus and Tommy getting their second chances. One life could still make a difference. One choice could still matter. One ghost could still haunt the monsters. The sniper was reborn, not for vengeance this time, but for justice. And the mountains of Montana waited with their secrets and their reckoning. The real war was just beginning. But Elijah Carter was ready. Finally, impossibly ready. The plane disappeared into the clouds, carrying 4 warriors toward their fate, and somewhere in a fortified estate, Victor Wolf felt the first cold touch of the ghost that was coming for him.